Anxiety and depression are far too common in today's youth. From where it comes and how it festers inside one's mind varies among each person. Worst of all, it's not something easily seen from the outside. It's this dark, crippling demon that sits on you and weighs 1,000 pounds, stopping you from getting out of bed. It's this stern, blank voice in the back of your head telling you that you're useless. It's a backpack filled with rocks and insecurities stopping you from reaching the summit of your goals. And other times, it's a mirror version of yourself, telling you to just quit. Whatever form your mental illness comes in, treating and living with it can feel next to impossible. It can almost feel like climbing a 7-chapter long mountain. Celeste is an indie platformer developed and published by Matt Makes Games. It was released on January 25th, 2018 on just about every platform. The developers describe Celeste as a game about climbing a mountain. And while literally the game is 7 chapters of scaling Mount Celeste, you're also climbing Madeline's metaphorical mountain of self-doubt and anxiety. You play as Madeline, a determined young woman as she embarks on a personal journey to climb Mount Celeste. As she approaches the base of the mountain, she is met by an old woman, warning Madeline that she is not yet ready to climb. Madeline dismisses the woman as crazy and proceeds anyway. As she crosses a bridge to her first checkpoint, it collapses. But before she falls, a bird teaches her one of the core mechanics of the game, the Airdash. The first chapter begins as Madeline travels through the Forsaken City. Halfway through this chapter, she meets another traveler named Theo. As the two talk, Theo tells Madeline that he came to the mountain to take pictures. Madeline refuses to tell Theo her reason to come to the mountain, but she does admit that she desires to reach the summit, something that Theo doesn't quite seem interested in. As she nears the end of the chapter, she reaches the Celeste Memorial and makes camp there. The chapter ends with Madeline thinking this might have been a mistake. The second chapter opens with Madeline awaking to several odd changes around her. Her campfire has turned green, blue lights are falling from the sky, and the text on the memorial is rearranging itself at random. After some exploring, Madeline finds a large mirror. As she passes the mirror, she notices her reflection is distorted. Her reflection has purple hair, white skin, and red eyes. The reflection then breaks out of the mirror and runs away. As Madeline continues to explore, she comes across her reflection at a flameless campfire. The reflection reveals herself to be known as part of Madeline, or as the fanbase likes to call, Badeline. Badeline tells Madeline that she should stop climbing the mountain and that it's much too difficult a task for her to manage. But Madeline insists that she has to continue her journey. Badeline disagrees, offers that the both of them should just go home, and chases Madeline through the rest of the level. Post-chase, Madeline approaches a ringing payphone where the caller convinces Madeline that she is dreaming. Payphone transforms into a monster that eats her. Madeline wakes up to find herself back at the Celeste Memorial, everything returned to normal. Theo encounters Madeline and they have a short conversation. Madeline finds the payphone from her dream and calls her mom, who tries to calm Madeline down. Okay, so before I get any further, I think the metaphors that Celeste makes are extremely overt. The game admits that Madeline is a part of Madeline. In fact, her in-game name is literally part of Madeline. So I think it's fair to say that Madeline is a personified version of Madeline's self-doubts and anxieties. So when Madeline tries to convince Madeline to leave the mountain, it's actually Madeline doubting herself. Through this chase, we physically see the struggle Madeline has with herself and her mental illness, because Madeline does nothing to combat Madeline. We end up with Madeline's anxieties chasing her. I think Madeline stops chasing Madeline at the end of the chapter because her wave of anxiety has passed. As a side note, I feel like I'm saying Badeline and Madeline a lot, so I might just switch to Maddie and Batty for a bit. So to summarize this chapter, Maddie finds the Mount Celeste mirror. Her anxieties and self-doubts are removed from her and personified by a darker form called Madeline, and Batty is trying to stop Maddie from continuing her journey. And while these events are excused as a dream, it's really just the first example of Mount Celeste's powers. On to Chapter 3. Madeline proceeds up the mountain until she comes across the world-renowned Celestial Resort. There, she meets Mr. Oshiro, a ghost who runs the abandoned hotel. Oshiro offers Maddie the presidential suite, but she insists that she doesn't want to stay and is merely passing through. Despite Oshiro's claims that the hotel's doing well, Maddie sees it in an obvious state of disarray and goes about helping Oshiro clean it up. Once arriving at the presidential suite, Batty shows up and tells Oshiro that Maddie is only helping her to fuel her twisted ego. This angers Oshiro and he chases Maddie across the roof. Oshiro eventually calms down and tells Maddie to leave him alone. Madeline continues her journey. So, as you play, you find the goo spread throughout the hotel is actually Oshiro's insecurities. So based on this and the previous chapter, it seems like Mount Celeste's power is that it creates a physical form from one's self-doubts. According to the old woman from the start, the Celestial Resort is much more than a hotel to Mr. Oshiro. The hotel is likely a metaphor for Mr. Oshiro's mind, cluttered with black goo that is his insecurities. Like the hotel, Oshiro's mind is a mess. Madeline, without Batty around, offers to give aid and help Oshiro clean up. During the cleaning, Oshiro is constantly assuring Maddie that her help isn't needed as the hotel staff will do the cleaning instead, despite Maddie never seeing a single staff member. Oshiro says he doesn't need help cleaning up his mind out of politeness. This is like when you ask a friend how they're doing and they reply fine, knowing that in fact they are not fine. While your friend might need help, they feel bad for asking because they don't want to put their problems onto your plate. When they reach the suite, an argument between Oshiro and Maddie causes Batty to appear in the room's mirror. Batty again breaks free from the mirror and berates Oshiro, telling him bluntly that the hotel is low quality. It's all again very on the nose. The argument causes Maddie to reveal her ugly side, which is Batty, unintentionally hurting Oshiro. The end of the chapter is actually very sad, and while Oshiro does show some toxic traits, like trying to coerce Maddie to stay at the hotel, I feel bad for him. Batty offers that the only reason Maddie helped Oshiro was to fuel her own ego and make her feel like she's a good person, and that Maddie took this detour so that she didn't have to continue climbing the mountain. There's this Laurie Myers quote that starts, "It's sometimes easier to help others rather than helping yourself," and this is exactly what Maddie is doing in this chapter. Climbing to Mount Celeste summit is the best way for Maddie to help herself. Instead, she gets stuck on trying to help Oshiro, and due to their argument, only ends up making it worse. Chapter 4 begins with Maddie running into the old woman again, who warns Maddie of the dangers ahead and tells her that it would be okay to give up at this point. Maddie rejects the offer and continues. She runs into Theo at a gondola that spans a large ravine. Theo convinces her to ride in it together to the other side despite Maddie's worries about its safety. Theo tries to cheer Maddie up with a selfie. As the two pose, Madeline shows up on top of the gondola, causing it to stall. This sends Maddie into a panic attack. As Maddie lashes out at Theo, he tries to calm her by teaching her a breathing technique. He tells her to imagine a feather and trying to keep it afloat with steady breaths. This works, and when Maddie comes to her senses, she realizes that the gondola is working again. After the two exit, Theo shows the comedic result of their selfie. This is a pretty simple chapter. Madeline learns that some obstacles, although intimidating, have to be passed, and with the right tools, like Theo's breathing technique, can be safely managed. So while Madeline does stall the gondola, it's only because of Madeline's initial doubts. In reality, there's nothing wrong with the gondola, evident by it immediately working once Madeline calms down. Chapter 5 opens with the pair encountering the Mirror Temple. Madeline, still nervous from the gondola ride, doesn't want to enter, but Theo goes inside to take pictures. Madeline reluctantly follows behind. Shortly after, Madeline finds Theo's discarded phone in front of a mirror. She tells herself not to panic, grabs the phone, and proceeds further. After more exploration, Madeline comes across Theo, now stuck in a giant mirror. He explains that he got sucked in trying to take a mirror selfie. Before they can finish their conversation, Theo is forced to leave. Maddie continues until she comes across a large mirror covered with a curtain. When she pushes the curtain aside, she is sucked in by the mirror. Maddie wakes up in the mirror world, where Madeline chastises Maddie and says that the temple magnifies the mountain's powers, and that the strange things in the mirror world come from Maddie herself. Maddie searches more until she finds Theo encased in a crystal. The rest of the level is Maddie carrying Crystal Theo to the exit while avoiding the monsters trying to attack the pair. So the temple's a bit more complicated than what we've seen so far. Through Maddie's conversation with Madeline, we learn that the Mirror Temple is a concentrated area of the mountain's powers. The things seen in the mirror come from the person who gazed into it, similar to Madeline's origins. The monsters come from Maddie, the eyeballs come from Theo. We know this because the monsters only chase Maddie, and the eyes only follow Theo. From this, I think the monsters represent Maddie's fear of an action or an ability to help her friends. She wants to save Theo, but the monsters are trying to stop her. Her fears are trying to stop her. As for Theo, I think the eyes represent the pressure he feels from himself, his late grandfather, and society. During the game, we learn that Theo recently quit a job he hated and came to Mount Celeste because his grandfather had made the climb. Exiting the temple shows that the pair have conquered their fears. Chapter 6 is called Reflection and is often seen as the best narrative chapter in the game. As such, I will do my best going over it. After leaving the temple, Theo and Maddie set up a campfire and talk about their reasons for coming to Mount Celeste. Madeline explains that the mountain has given a body to all the things she isn't very proud of. She thanks Theo for helping her through everything thus far. Theo tells Maddie that she reminds him of his sister Alex. Madeline explains that she struggles with depression and is usually quite anxious, and that only her mother knows about these problems. Madeline says that she wanted to climb the mountain in order to challenge herself and accomplish something big. They decide to take a selfie to remember this night and go to sleep. In a dream, Madeline begins to understand that she can't run from her problems. She decides that she wants to set Madeline free. This actually upsets Madeline, as she doesn't want to be abandoned. Madeline believes that she's only been trying to help Madeline and feels betrayed. This causes Madeline to panic, trying the breathing technique Theo taught her. Madeline interrupts this and cuts the feather in half. Outside of the dream, Madeline falls off the edge of Mount Celeste and plummets into a deep chasm. If there's any actual gameplay in this section, I think this would be a decent cutoff point for a new chapter. Madeline believes that she's making progress, and she is making progress, but it is misguided. Telling Theo about her mental health is a good step in the right direction. Being open with people you can trust is helpful, as they can aid with some of the burden and remind you of good coping techniques. However, Madeline is quite literally part of Madeline. Even though Madeline is the parts of Madeline that she isn't very proud of, Maddie is still a significant piece of what makes Madeline herself, and Madeline is simply misguided. She thinks she is helping by keeping Madeline in her comfort zone. The first thing Madeline says is to leave Mount Celeste because she knows about the hardships Maddie will face on the mountain. Madeline doesn't know any better, feels betrayed, and takes her emotions out on Maddie by sending her to the bottom of the mountain. Madeline's fall is broken by a body of water at the bottom of a crystal cave. Lost in the cave, Maddie begins to lose hope. She's angry that she was so close to the summit and Madeline caused her to fall. During her exploration, she comes across the old woman, who at first thinks Madeline has given up. The old woman tells Madeline to talk to Madeline and suggests that maybe Madeline is simply scared of getting to the top of the mountain. In a reversal of Chapter 2, Madeline chases down Madeline and tries to apologize for being selfish and attempting to leave her instead of helping her. Maddie comforts her by saying that if they both want to leave this cave, they must work together. They end up merging into one character, giving Madeline another dash move. They begin climbing back to where they once were. They find Granny and Theo, who went into the cave to find them. Maddie doesn't believe that they will reach the top, but Maddie says that if they work together, they'll get there sooner or later. So, This is the section that reveals everything about the two characters. Both Madeline and Madeline have different understandings of each other, and were never on the same page. Madeline believed that by removing parts of her that she isn't proud of, Madeline will become a better person and able to reach the summit. Madeline believed that once Madeline reached the top of the summit, she wouldn't be needed anymore. The part of Madeline that is trying to keep her safe won't be needed. And although misguided, I do believe that Madeline is trying to keep Maddie safe. That's sort of what anxiety feels like sometimes. Just this anchor that keeps you in your comfort zone, or makes you think about every possible way that something can go wrong. And this is just a defense mechanism that tries to keep you safe. Once Madeline realizes that she and her anxieties need to work together, they reunite into a better person, shown by gaining newfound confidence and literally a new ability. And it's at this point that the main story ends. Chapter 7 is my favorite gameplay level, but it doesn't have too much story. It's just a platforming level composed of different areas of the past chapters as Madeline climbs to the summit. There are a few more chapters after this, but it's just to tie a bit more of the story together after the epilogue. I've covered a lot of the analysis during the chapter explanations, so I'll give just a summary or an overview. Mount Celeste is a powerful magical mountain that creates physical entities from one's insecurities or mental health issues. In Madeline, Madeline is created. In Mr. Oshiro, the black goo is created. In Theo, it's the eyeballs. It is through climbing to the summit that the mountain hopes the climber will learn coping mechanisms. We learn through Madeline and Oshiro that it's possible for the mountain to keep you stuck on it if you haven't dealt with your problem. Oshiro is stuck in the Celestial Resort, and Madeline was stuck in the Crystal Cavern. Eventually, though, both manage to leave the mountain, as seen in the epilogue. In Madeline's case, she learns that she cannot escape her anxieties, and that she can't abandon her anxieties either. Instead, she must live with it. And ultimately, that's what anyone struggling with mental illness must do. It's not something that will ever go away. There are ways to minimize it, and some days are better than others, but it'll always be there. The journey to getting to a better place in your mind can be daunting, and comparing it to climbing a mountain has been done 1,000 times over. But what Celeste does differently is it tells you that climbing the mountain isn't the end of your anxiety, but instead it serves as a reminder to you that you can still accomplish things while coping with it. And that's okay too, because Celeste is just a game about climbing a mountain.